She used to collect recyclables to survive, but that night she found something different in the trash. A rich man, wounded and unconscious. Without hesitation, she put him in her cart and took him to her shack, protecting him with everything she had. When he wakes up, he doesn't remember who he is, but he begins to discover something much greater: the value of being saved by someone who has nothing. This story turns everything upside down and ends where luxury could never reach, in the heart of a child. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The freezing rain pounded the crumbling streets of Detroit's east side, turning potholes into small lakes and sending rivers of murky water down broken gutters. 7-year-old Emma Sullivan pushed an old shopping cart through narrow alleys, her small frame barely visible beneath an oversized yellow raincoat. Her blonde hair, hastily tied in a messy ponytail, stuck out from under a knit cap that had seen better days. Emma moved with purpose, her young eyes scanning the ground with practiced efficiency. Each aluminum can and plastic bottle meant another quarter in her pocket, another chance for dinner that night. Her childhood had vanished too early. Her father Jake's drinking had forced her to grow up fast. Most nights, she'd find him passed, out on the floor of their ramshackle home, a converted storage unit they'd claimed in an abandoned warehouse complex. She knew how to handle unconscious bodies, how to position them so they wouldn't choke, how to recognize the difference between sleep and something worse. "Just need 10 more bottles," she whispered to herself, pushing through the discomfort of wet socks and blistered hands. The shopping cart's right wheel squeaked with each rotation, a sound that had become oddly comforting in its predictability. As she turned a corner, the flickering streetlight revealed a dark shape among torn garbage bags. Emma paused, her heart thumping against her ribs. It wasn't unusual to find homeless people in these alleys, but something about this scene felt different. Cautiously approaching, she discovered a man in an expensive suit, soaked through and muddied, unconscious with blood trickling from a head wound. The familiar smell of alcohol hung in the air, but Emma's young, experienced eyes recognized that this wasn't just drunkenness. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale beneath streaks of dirt. She reached out with a small hand to check his pulse the way she'd learned from YouTube videos at the public library. Weak, but steady. The man wore a gold watch and designer shoes that would have been pawned long ago if he were just another homeless person. His face, though scratched and bruised, had the clean-shaven look of someone important. "Mister?" she called, shaking his shoulder gently. "Hey, mister, you okay?" No response. Emma glanced around the empty alley. No one would come looking here, especially not in this weather. If she left him, he might not survive the night. With a determination far beyond her years, she emptied half the recyclables from her cart and struggled to heave the man's tall frame inside. It took all her strength, but she managed to position him so his head wouldn't bang against the metal as she pushed. She covered him with a tarp she kept for rainy days like this, tucking it around his shoulders to keep him warm. "Don't worry, mister," she said, though she knew he couldn't hear. "I'll get you somewhere safe." The journey back to her makeshift home took twice as long with the heavy load. By the time Emma reached the warehouse, her arms ached and her lungs burned from exertion. The old building loomed dark against the night sky, most of its windows broken. But in one corner, behind a rusted door marked Storage 17, a faint light glowed. Emma navigated carefully through the entrance she'd widened by removing loose bricks. Inside was a space no bigger than a small bedroom, but she'd transformed it with remarkable creativity. Wooden pallets formed a raised floor to keep out the damp. Colorful fabrics hung from clotheslines created privacy sections. Air camping lantern provided light, while a small propane heater gave off precious warmth. In one corner, a stack of library books stood neatly arranged, her prized possessions. With tremendous effort, she managed to drag the man onto her own pallet bed, covered with the cleanest blankets she owned. She removed his wet jacket and shoes, then cleaned the blood from his head with a damp cloth. The wound wasn't as bad as she'd feared. Head injuries just bled a lot, she remembered reading. She covered him with her 2 blankets, sacrificing her own comfort for his. "You'll be okay," she said, patting his hand awkwardly. "I've done this before, with my dad." She boiled water on the small camping stove and made 2 cups of instant chicken soup, saving one for when he woke up. As the night deepened, Emma curled up on a pile of flattened cardboard boxes, wrapped in her raincoat, and an old curtain she'd found in a dumpster behind an apartment building. She watched the steady rise and fall of the stranger's chest until sleep finally claimed her. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through a plastic-covered window. Emma woke instantly when she heard movement. The man was stirring, his hand reaching to touch the bandage she'd fashioned from a clean t-shirt. His eyes opened, startlingly blue against his dirt-smudged face, and darted around the room in confusion before landing on her. He tried to sit up, but winced in pain. "Take it easy," Emma said, approaching cautiously. "You hit your head pretty bad. Where—" His voice was hoarse. "Where am I?" "My house," she answered simply. "Found you in the alley by Wilson Street. You were bleeding." The man's brow furrowed as he seemed to struggle with this information. "How did I get here?" "Shopping cart," Emma said with a hint of pride. "You're heavy, but I managed." He looked at her with newfound respect and bewilderment. "You brought me here by yourself?" Emma nodded, then offered him the cup of soup she'd reheated. "It's not much, but it'll make you feel better." His hands trembled slightly as he accepted it. "Thank you." After taking a sip, he asked, "What's your name?" "Emma Sullivan," she replied. "What's yours?" The man's face clouded with confusion. He closed his eyes, concentration etched across his features. I don't know," he finally admitted, genuine fear flashing in his eyes. "I can't remember." Emma studied him for a moment, then shrugged with the remarkable adaptability of children. "That's okay, I'll call you Mr. B." "Mr. B." A small smile tugged at his lips despite his obvious distress. "For the B on your ring," she explained, pointing to his right hand where a signet ring bore an ornate letter B. He looked down at it, as if seeing it for the first time. "Mr. B it is then." Over the next few days, Mr. B regained his physical strength, but his memory remained frustratingly blank. Each morning, Emma would leave him with some food, crackers, an apple, whatever she could spare, before heading to school. She'd insisted on going despite his condition. "Education is important," she told him firmly, when he suggested she stay to help him recover. "The library lady says it's my ticket out of here." In the afternoons, she'd return to find small improvements to their shelter, a leaky corner patched, a wobbly table fixed, a new shelf made from scavenged wood. Mr. B proved handy with tools he found in an abandoned maintenance closet. Though he couldn't remember his past, his hands seemed to know what to do. One evening, as they shared a meal of beans heated on the camping stove, Emma noticed him staring at a fashion magazine she'd borrowed from the library. "You like fashion?" he asked. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I'm going to be a designer someday. Make beautiful clothes that make people feel special." She pulled out a folder filled with drawings on scrap paper, dresses and outfits sketched with remarkable detail. For someone so young. Mr. B flipped through them with genuine interest. "These are very good, Emma. You have real talent." She beamed at the praise, then hesitated before asking, "Do you think you have a family looking for you?" Mr. B's expression shifted as he considered Emma's question. The shadow of something, a memory perhaps, passed across his face before disappearing again. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but someone must be wondering where I am." Emma nodded solemnly. "Maybe. But until you remember, you can stay here." She pulled her knees up to her chest. "It's nice not to be alone." The vulnerability in her voice broke something open in Mr. B's heart. "What about your father? You mentioned him before." Emma's eyes darkened. "Dad's on one of his trips. Sometimes he disappears for weeks." She spoke matter-of-factly, but her small fingers twisted the hem of her shirt. "He'll come back. When the money runs out, he always does." Mr. B carefully set aside the fashion magazine. "And your mother?" "Left when I was 4. Dad says she couldn't handle the pressure." Emma shrugged as if it didn't matter, but the pain in her eyes told a different story. "It's okay. I manage fine." The casualness with which she accepted her abandonment struck Mr. B deeply. No child should have to manage on their own. Well, he said, clearing his throat against a sudden tightness, I'm not going anywhere until I figure out who I am. And I could use a guide who knows these streets. Emma's face brightened. I'm a good guide. Know all the best dumpsters, and when the bakery throws out yesterday's bread. She hesitated. But there's a problem. What's that? Dad might not like finding you here when he gets back. Mr. B nodded thoughtfully. Then I'll need to earn my keep, won't I? Make myself useful. The next morning, Mr. B accompanied Emma on her recycling route. He pushed the shopping cart while she darted between alleys and dumpsters with the agility of a small cat. She showed him which restaurants left the best recyclables, which apartment buildings separated their trash properly, and which security. Guards would look the other way if you smiled politely. You're good at this? Mr. B observed as Emma charmed a donut shop owner into giving them day-old pastries along with empty bottles. People like helping kids, she explained pragmatically as they walked away with their treasure. Especially if you're polite and don't cause trouble. Mr. B looked at her with new understanding. She'd developed strategies for survival that no child should need to know. As days turned into weeks, their routine solidified. Each morning, Emma would attend her public school, insisting that education was her priority, while Mr. B explored the neighborhood, searching for anything that might trigger his memory. In the afternoons, they'd collect recyclables together, and in the evenings, he'd help her with homework before they'd share simple meals prepared on the camping stove. Mr. B proved remarkably resourceful. He fixed a leaking roof with materials salvaged from a construction site dumpster. He bartered mechanical skills, mysteriously intact despite his amnesia, for necessities from local shop owners. And most importantly to Emma, he showed up, consistently day after day. How did you learn to draw so well? He asked one evening, as Emma sketched a flowing gown on cardboard salvaged from behind a liquor store. The library has books, she explained, and Miss Patterson lets me use the good-colored pencils if I help shelve books after school. She chewed her lip in concentration as she shaded the dress. I like imagining who would wear each design. This one's for someone important, like a princess or a movie star. Mr. B watched her work, marveling at the sophistication of her designs. You know, when I look at buildings downtown, I get this feeling like I understand how they're structured, like I once knew about architecture or construction. Emma looked up with interest. Maybe you were an architect or a builder. Maybe, he agreed, though something about it didn't feel quite right. One evening, as they walked home in the fading daylight, they passed a newspaper stand. The headline caught Mr. B's attention. Billion-dollar merger falls through as Belmont CEO remains. Missing. He stopped abruptly, staring at the grainy photo beneath the headline. What's wrong? Emma asked, noticing his frozen posture. That man, Mr. B pointed to the photo. Something about him seems familiar. Emma stood on tiptoes to see the picture. He looks important. Fancy suit like the one you were wearing. Mr. B felt a sharp pain behind his eyes as fragments of memory tried to surface. Boardrooms, handshakes, arguments, a glass of whiskey. Just as quickly they slipped away, leaving him disoriented. You okay, Mr. B? Emma's concerned voice pulled him back to the present. I'm fine, he assured her, though both knew it wasn't entirely true. That night, Mr. B dreamed of falling, of betrayal, of a voice saying, "You'll never prove it was me." He woke with a gasp, sweating despite the cool air. Emma slept peacefully in her corner, unaware of his turmoil. Days later, while Emma was at school, Mr. B ventured further downtown than he'd gone before. Something about the gleaming towers pulled at him. Standing across from the imposing Belmont Industries building, he felt a strange sense of familiarity that made his heart race. Excuse me, sir, a voice interrupted his thoughts. A security guard approached with a suspicious expression. Can I help you with something? I was just admiring the architecture, Mr. B explained, gesturing to the building. The guard's expression softened slightly. It is impressive. 34. Floors of glass and steel. Mr. Belmont designed it himself, you know. Belmont? Yeah, Blake Belmont, the founder. though his son Alexander runs things now. The guard glanced at his watch, or did before he disappeared. Whole city's talking about it. Mr. B felt lightheaded suddenly. Disappeared. About a month ago. No trace. His car was found abandoned by the river, but no sign of him. The guard shook his head. Strange business, especially with that big merger hanging in the balance. Mr. B thanked the guard and walked away, his mind racing. A month ago aligned with when Emma had found him. Could it be coincidence? As he turned a corner, he caught his reflection in a shop window and froze. Despite the beard he'd grown and the second-hand clothes he now wore, something about his face echoed the newspaper photo. That evening, Emma noticed his distraction. "You're thinking hard," she observed as they sorted the day's recyclables. "Did you remember something?" Mr. B hesitated. "Maybe, I'm not sure." He wasn't ready to voice his suspicion that he might be Alexander Belmont, missing CEO. It seemed too fantastical, and yet... "I found something today," Emma announced, breaking into his thoughts. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small spiral notebook with a worn red cover. It was in the free box at the library. "Thought you might like it." The simple kindness of the gesture moved him deeply. "Thank you, Emma." "You can write down things you remember," she suggested. "Miss Patterson says writing helps organize your thoughts." That night, after Emma fell asleep, Mr. B opened the notebook and began to write. Fragments, impressions, the odd disjointed memories that surfaced at unexpected moments. By morning, he'd filled 3 pages with clues to his past. The next day brought an unexpected crisis. Emma came home from school with flushed cheeks and bright eyes. "What's got you so excited?" Mr. B asked, smiling at her unusual animation. "The school's having a design contest," she exclaimed. "Students can submit clothing designs and the winners get displayed at the Community Arts Center. There's even a scholarship prize." "Emma, that's wonderful. Your designs are amazing." Her smile dimmed slightly. "But I need real art supplies. And a submission fee." She kicked at the floor. $20. $20 might as well have been $2,000 in their economy of salvaged goods and recycling refunds. "We'll figure it out," Mr. B promised, already calculating what he might sell or what odd jobs he could pick up. Later that week, while helping clean the back room of a small electronics repair shop in exchange for a hot meal, Mr. B noticed a broken laptop marked for disposal. "What's wrong with it?" he asked the shop owner, an elderly man named Howard. "Power supply's fried, not worth fixing given its age." Mr. B studied the machine. "Mind if I take it?" Howard shrugged. "It's trash to me. Knock yourself out." That night, after Emma went to bed, Mr. B disassembled the laptop with surprising dexterity. His hands seemed to know what his mind couldn't remember. He salvaged parts from other discarded electronics he'd collected, and by morning had a functioning computer, though missing. Its original case and looking like something from a science fiction movie. "How did you do that?" Emma asked in awe when she discovered his creation. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "It just made sense to me." With the refurbished laptop and access to the library's Wi-Fi, Mr. B began researching Alexander Belmont. Each article, each photo sent jolts of recognition through him. The merger that was mentioned involved Belmont Industries and Reynolds Technologies, a deal worth billions that would reshape the technology landscape. One evening, while browsing financial news sites, a photo appeared that stopped his heart. Alexander Belmont shaking hands with Victor Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Technologies. Reynolds' face triggered something visceral: distrust, anger, fear. Mr. B slammed the laptop, closed, his breathing ragged. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, looking up from her homework. "Nothing," he lied, not wanting to worry her. "Just a headache." That night, the dreams came more vividly than before. Heated arguments in boardrooms, suspicious documents, a drink that tasted wrong, headlights approaching fast on a dark road, the crash of his car hitting water, and always Victor Reynolds' face smiling coldly as he said, "You should have taken the deal, Alex." Mr. B woke with a name on his lips. Alexander. Emma was waiting with a glass of water when he bolted upright, his face pale in the dim light of their shelter. "Another bad dream?" she asked, offering the water with a steadiness that belied her young age. "Yes," he answered, taking a grateful sip. "But this time, I think I remembered my name." Her eyes widened. "Really? What is it?" "Alexander," he said carefully, testing the sound of it. "Alexander Belmont." Emma tilted her head, considering. "Alexander." She tried the name, then shook her head. "Nope, you still look like a Mr. B to me." Despite his racing thoughts, he smiled. "Then Mr. B it is, at least between us." But the revelation changed everything. If he truly was Alexander Belmont, CEO of Belmont Industries, then his disappearance wasn't an accident. Victor Reynolds had arranged it, attempted to eliminate him to force through the merger that Alexander had been fighting. The flashes of memory grew stronger, more coherent, discovering irregularities in Reynolds' financial records, realizing the merger would give Reynolds control of proprietary technology that could be weaponized, confronting Reynolds privately about his discoveries. The next day, while Emma was at school, Mr. B, now mentally acknowledging himself as Alexander, ventured to a public library further downtown. Using a computer there, he researched more deeply, careful to avoid being noticed. The merger between Belmont Industries and Reynolds Technologies had stalled in his absence. The board had appointed an interim CEO, his cousin Nathaniel Belmont, but shareholders were growing restless. More concerning were the reports that Belmont stock was being quietly acquired by shell companies with suspicious ties to Reynolds. Alexander needed to reclaim his identity and company, but how? He had no ID, no proof of who he was. His appearance had changed dramatically. The beard, longer hair, and weathered skin from weeks of outdoor work made him nearly unrecognizable from the polished executive in news photos. More importantly, going public would put Emma at risk. If Reynolds had tried to eliminate him once, he wouldn't hesitate to try again, and might target anyone associated with him. As he walked back to their shelter, Alexander passed a newsstand with financial papers. The headline made him stop. Chorister Reynolds pushes for Belmont takeover, cites leadership vacuum. Time was running out. That evening, Emma noticed his preoccupation. "You're extra quiet," she observed, as they shared a meal of soup and day-old bread from the bakery. "Just thinking," he replied, trying to sound normal. "About being Alexander Belmont?" Her perceptiveness startled him. "How did you—" "I'm 7, not stupid," she said matter-of-factly. "I saw you looking at those newspaper pictures, and you talk in your sleep sometimes." Alexander sighed. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to be sure." "Are you sure now?" "Almost completely." He hesitated. "Emma, if I am Alexander Belmont, things might have to change. There are people looking for me, some who want to help, others who might want to hurt me." Her small face grew serious. "Bad people?" "At least one," he confirmed. "A man named Victor Reynolds. I think he's the reason I ended up in that alley." Emma considered this information with remarkable composure. "Will you have to leave?" The question was asked casually, but he heard the fear beneath it. "Eventually, I'll need to go back and fix things at my company," he admitted. "But I won't abandon you, Emma, I promise." She nodded, but her eyes remained doubtful. She'd heard promises before. The next morning, Alexander made a decision. Using the refurbished laptop at a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi, he created an encrypted email account and sent a message to the one person he felt he could trust, his executive assistant, Olivia Chen. The message was cryptic, containing details only the real Alexander Belmont would know, along with instructions to meet at a small diner near the public library. 2 days later, dressed in the cleanest clothes he could manage, Alexander sat in a back booth at Rosie's diner, nursing a cup of coffee. When Olivia walked in, elegant, professional, and clearly anxious, he almost called out to her before remembering his changed appearance. Instead, he watched as she scanned the diner, passed over him without recognition, and took a seat at the counter. After a moment, he approached her carefully. "The orchids in the Tokyo office needed repotting," he said quietly. a reference to a private joke between them about an incident during an international business trip. Olivia froze, then turned slowly to face him. Her eyes widened as she studied his features beneath the beard and longer hair. "Alexander?" she whispered in disbelief. He nodded once, and tears sprang to her eyes. "My God, we thought you were—" She stopped herself. "What happened to you?" "Not." "Here," he cautioned, leading her back to his booth. Over the next hour, he explained what he could remember and his suspicions about Reynolds. Olivia confirmed that Reynolds had been making aggressive moves to acquire Belmont Industries, using Alexander's absence to create uncertainty and drive down stock prices. "Your cousin Nathaniel is trying his best as interim CEO, but the board is split. Some want to accept Reynolds' offer just to end the uncertainty," she explained. "Without proof of Reynolds' misconduct, there's little Nathaniel can do." "The proof existed," Alexander said. "I had files, documents showing Reynolds was using the merger to gain access to our quantum encryption technology for military applications we explicitly opposed." "Where are these files now?" Alexander closed his eyes, concentrating. "My private server, accessible only from my penthouse office system with biometric authentication." Olivia nodded. "The penthouse has been sealed since your disappearance. Security protocols you implemented yourself. Then the evidence is still there. But I can't just walk into Belmont Tower looking like this. Reynolds has people everywhere." "I can help," Olivia offered immediately. "What do you need?" Alexander hesitated, thinking not just of himself but of Emma. Time, resources, and absolute discretion. By the time he returned to the warehouse that evening, Alexander had a prepaid phone, fresh clothes, and a small amount of cash, enough to make immediate improvements to their living situation, but not enough to draw attention. Emma was waiting anxiously, her small face pinched with worry. "You were gone a long time," she said, trying to sound casual but unable to hide her relief at his return. "I'm sorry," he said, setting down the bags he carried. "I had an important meeting." Her eyes narrowed. "With Alexander Belmont." "People?" He nodded, impressed again by her perception. "With someone I trust. She's going to help me sort things out." Emma studied the bags suspiciously. "What's all that?" "Some necessities," Alexander explained. "Unpacking groceries, new blankets, a small battery-powered lamp, and a prepaid phone." "And this is for you." He handed her a sketchbook and professional colored pencils. Her eyes widened as she took the art supplies with reverent hands. "These are the fancy ones, the kind real artists use." "You are a real artist," he said simply. For the next week, Alexander balanced his time between preparing to reclaim his identity and ensuring Emma's needs were met. With Olivia's help, he gathered evidence against Reynolds and prepared for his return. But as his plan took shape, he faced a difficult decision about Emma. One evening, as they sat together reviewing her homework, he broached the subject carefully. "Emma, when I go back to being Alexander Belmont officially, things will change." She kept her eyes on her math worksheet. "I know you'll go back to your fancy apartment and important meetings." "Yes, but that doesn't mean I'm leaving you behind," he insisted. "I want to help you, make sure you have a safe place to live. Good food, everything you need." Emma looked up, her expression guarded. "What about my dad?" Alexander had been dreading this question. In their weeks together, Jake Sullivan had never appeared. According to neighborhood sources Olivia had discreetly contacted, he'd been arrested for public intoxication in another part of the city and was serving a 90-day sentence. "Your father is unavailable right now," Alexander said carefully. "But when he returns, we can figure things out together." "You mean pay him to go away?" Emma said with startling insight. "That's what Mom's boyfriend did. Gave Dad money to disappear for a while." Alexander was shocked by this revelation. "Is that what happened?" Emma nodded, returning to her math problems. "Dad used the money for drinking. Mom and her boyfriend moved to Florida. Nobody wanted me enough to fight about it." The matter-of-fact way she described such profound abandonment broke Alexander's heart. "I want you, Emma," he said firmly. "I want you in my life, and I'll fight for you if I have to." She studied him with those old soul eyes that had seen too much. Even when... You're Alexander Belmont again, with your big important company, especially then, he promised. The next day, Alexander met with Olivia again to finalize their plan. In 3 days, she would arrange a private board meeting under the guise of discussing Reynolds' latest offer. Alexander would appear, properly, groomed and dressed, with evidence of Reynolds' manipulation and illegal activities. What about security, he asked. Reynolds will have people watching. I've arranged for our most trusted security team, Olivia assured him. People who've been with you since the beginning. As Alexander prepared to leave the diner, Olivia handed him a small box. Your signet ring. We found it in your car. Her expression darkened. The car that was deliberately pushed into the river. Alexander opened the box to find the Belmont family ring, the same one Emma had noticed when she first found him. The bee that had given him his name in their small world together. Thank you, he said, slipping it onto his finger. It felt right, but also heavy with responsibility. That evening, he returned to find Emma waiting with excitement. I entered the contest, she announced, showing him the submission form for the school design competition. Miss Patterson helped me fill out the paperwork. That's wonderful, Alexander said, genuinely proud. Your designs are amazing, Emma. They'll win for sure. She beamed at his confidence, then grew serious. I used your real name on the form, as my guardian. She watched his reaction carefully. Miss Patterson said a parent or guardian had to sign. I told her my guardian's name is Alexander Belmont. Alexander was touched by this symbolic acceptance of his true identity. And what did Miss Patterson say? She got a funny look on her face. Then she said that's a very distinguished name and asked if you were related to the Alexander Belmont. I said I wasn't sure. Emma grinned mischievously. Was that okay? That was perfect, he assured her, wondering what would happen when the librarian realized the truth. Later that night, as Emma slept peacefully, Alexander sat with the red notebook she'd given him, making final preparations. Tomorrow, he would get a proper haircut and shave, reclaim his designer suits from storage, and prepare to step back into his life as Alexander Belmont, CEO of Belmont Industries. He would expose Victor Reynolds' treachery and reclaim his company. But as he watched Emma's small chest rise and fall with each breath, he knew his priorities had fundamentally changed. The company, the wealth, the power, they mattered only insofar as they could secure Emma's future. She had saved him in more ways than she would ever know. Alexander closed the notebook and made a silent vow. Whatever happened next, Emma Sullivan would never again feel unwanted or abandoned. She had found him in that alley and given him shelter when he had nothing. Now, he would move heaven and earth to give her the home and family she deserved. The transformation was remarkable. Standing before the mirror in a hotel bathroom, Alexander barely recognized himself. The beard was gone, his hair expertly cut and styled. The designer suit Olivia had retrieved from his penthouse fit perfectly, highlighting his athletic frame that had grown even leaner during his weeks in hiding. The Alexander Belmont staring back at him looked exactly like the financial magazine's most eligible CEO, except for his eyes. They carried a new depth, a hard-earned wisdom absent in earlier photographs. Mr. Belmont? Olivia knocked softly on the door. The car is waiting. One final adjustment to his tie, and Alexander stepped out, ready to reclaim his life. But first, there was something more important to handle. We need to make a stop, he told Olivia. As they entered the private elevator, the board meeting is in 2 hours, she reminded him. We've timed everything precisely. This won't take long, he assured her, but it's non-negotiable. 30 minutes later, the luxury sedan pulled up outside Emma's school. Alexander checked his watch. Afternoon recess would be starting now. He asked the driver to wait and walked toward the playground, staying partially hidden behind a large oak tree. There she was, sitting alone on a bench, sketching in her new notebook while other children played. The sight made his chest tighten. Even here she was an outsider. As if sensing his presence, Emma looked up. Her eyes widened as she recognized him despite the dramatic change in appearance. She glanced around to ensure no teachers were watching, then ran to the fence. "Mr. B," she whispered, eyes huge. "You look so different." "It's still me," he assured her, kneeling to her eye level. "I have that important meeting today, the one we talked about." She nodded solemnly. "To get your company back from the bad man." "Exactly, but I wanted to see you first, to tell you something important." He reached through the fence to take her small hand. "No matter what happens, I'm coming back for you, tonight. And things are going to get better, I promise." Emma's expression remained guarded. Too many broken promises in her young life. "Okay," she said simply. "I mean it, Emma. Look." He slipped his signet ring off and pressed it into her palm. "Hold this for me. It's the most valuable thing. Been in my family for generations. I'll come back for it. For you." She studied the heavy gold ring with the ornate bee, then closed her fingers around it tightly. "I'll keep it safe." "I know you will." He stood as a teacher began walking toward them. "I have to go, but remember, tonight." Back in the car, Olivia raised an eyebrow but said nothing about the detour. As they drove toward Belmont Tower, she briefed him on the final details. "The board believes they're meeting to discuss Reynolds' latest offer. Only Nathaniel knows the truth. We've swept the boardroom for bugs this morning and security has been quietly enhanced." Alexander nodded, mentally preparing for the confrontation ahead. "And the evidence?" "Everything from your private server has been secured but not accessed. Your fingerprint and retinal scan will be required." When they arrived at Belmont Tower, they entered through a private garage and service elevator, avoiding the main lobby where they might be recognized. In a small executive washroom, Alexander made his final preparations, straightening his tie and squaring his shoulders. "Ready?" Olivia asked. "As I'll ever be." The boardroom fell silent when Alexander walked in. 12 faces registered shock, disbelief, and, from his cousin Nathaniel, poorly concealed relief. "Alex?" Board Chairman Walter Montgomery was the first to recover his voice. "My God, is it really you?" "It's me, Walter," Alexander confirmed, taking his place at the head of the table, "and I believe this is still my seat." For the next hour, Alexander detailed his disappearance, careful to present only what could be proven. He explained discovering irregularities in Reynolds' financials, his private confrontation with the man, and the subsequent accident that left him with temporary amnesia. He did not mention Emma. "This is all very dramatic," said Eleanor Winters, the board's most skeptical member. "But what evidence do you have that Reynolds was behind your mishap?" "Amnesia is convenient, Alexander." "I agree, Eleanor. Fortunately, I don't expect you to take my word for it." Alexander nodded to Olivia, who activated the room's secure display system. "Before my disappearance, I compiled significant evidence of Reynolds' intentions for our quantum encryption technology. Intentions that violate not only our company charter, but potentially international law." The evidence was damning. Documents showed Reynolds had already promised Belmont's proprietary technology to military contractors before the merger was even finalized. Financial records revealed kickbacks to foreign entities on a preliminary weapons application. Most significantly, Alexander had recorded his final confrontation with Reynolds, where the man had explicitly threatened him. "You'll never prove it was me," Reynolds' voice filled the boardroom. "If you don't take the deal, you might find yourself having an unfortunate accident." Silence fell as the recording ended. Then the boardroom erupted in voices. "This is criminal! We need to contact the authorities immediately." "What about the shareholders?" Alexander raised a hand for silence. "I've already begun legal proceedings against Reynolds personally and Reynolds Technologies as a corporation. The FBI has been notified of potential national security implications. As for our shareholders," he paused, looking each board member in the eye, "our stock will take a temporary hit when this becomes public, but our integrity and independence will remain intact. Belmont Industries has never been for sale to those who would weaponize our innovations, and under my leadership, it never will be." The vote was unanimous. Alexander Belmont was officially reinstated as CEO, with the board's full support for his actions against Reynolds. As the meeting concluded, Alexander pulled his cousin aside. "Thank you, Nathaniel, for holding things together." Nathaniel shook his head. I was just keeping your seat warm, Alex. Everyone knows that. He hesitated. But where were you, really? The company's investigators found nothing. Alexander thought of the small warehouse room, of soup shared from chipped mugs, of a child's remarkable resilience. I was lucky enough to find shelter with someone who wanted nothing from me. It was educational. Later that afternoon, as news of his return spread through financial circles, Alexander faced the press in a carefully managed conference. He gave just enough information to satisfy public curiosity, without revealing details that might compromise the case against Reynolds. When asked about his apparent physical transformation, he'd lost weight, looked leaner, somehow changed. He simply smiled and said, "Nothing like a near-death experience to give you perspective." By evening, Alexander returned to his penthouse for the first time in over a month. The familiar luxury felt strangely hollow. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of the Detroit skyline, but all he could think about was a plastic-covered window in a warehouse and a small girl waiting for him to keep his promise. "I've scheduled meetings with all department heads for tomorrow morning," Olivia said, reviewing his calendar. "Legal wants a full briefing on the Reynolds situation, and PR needs to coordinate our messaging." "Cancel them," Alexander said quietly. "All of them?" Olivia looked up in surprise. "Reschedule for the day after tomorrow. There's something important I need to do first." He checked his watch. "Olivia, I need one more favor, a rather significant one." Meanwhile, Emma waited in their warehouse home, the gold signet ring clutched tightly in her small fist. She'd packed her few belongings, the sketchbook, her drawings, 2 favorite books from the library. She'd return them later, she promised. Herself, and the yellow raincoat that had seen her through so many storms. Part of her believed Alexander would return as promised. Another part, the part shaped by repeated disappointments, prepared for abandonment. When headlights swept across the warehouse wall, her heart jumped. A car engine, then silence. Footsteps approaching. Emma held her breath. The familiar knock came. 3 quick taps, then 2 slow ones, their secret code. She rushed to the door, pulling it open to find Alexander standing there, once again in casual clothes rather than his business suit. "You came back," she whispered, unable to hide her surprise. "I promised I would." He knelt to her level. "And I always keep my promises, Emma." She handed him the signet ring. "I kept it safe. I never doubted you would." He smiled, then grew serious. "Emma, I need to ask you something important. Would you like to come stay with me? In my home?" Her eyes widened. "In your fancy CEO place?" "Yes, it's not permanent yet. There are legal things to work out with your father and the authorities." "But Olivia, you remember I told you about her. She's arranged everything for now. Her social worker named Ms. Bennett will help us make it official." Emma considered this offer carefully. "What about my dad? When he comes back?" Alexander chose his words with care. "Your father needs help, Emma. The kind of help I can make sure he gets, but right now he's not able to take care of you properly. You deserve better than this." He gestured to the warehouse room. "I made it nice," she said defensively, looking around at her creative efforts to make the space a home. "You did an amazing job," Alexander agreed sincerely. "You're resourceful and strong and incredibly capable, but you're also 7 years old. You deserve to be a child, to focus on school and your designs and making friends, not on survival." Emma's expression revealed her internal struggle, the desire to believe in this chance against the protective skepticism born from experience. "It's your choice," Alexander added softly. "So I won't force you." After a long moment, Emma nodded. "Okay, but I want to bring my drawings." "Of course, all of them." Alexander helped her gather her few possessions, his heart breaking at how little she had to show for 7 years of life. Outside, a black SUV waited with Olivia in the passenger seat. A woman in the back introduced herself as Ms. Bennett from Child Protective Services, explaining to Emma that she was there to help make sure everything was handled properly. Emma listened with the serious attention she gave all adults, then climbed into the vehicle, her small backpack clutched to her chest. As they drove away from the warehouse district toward downtown Detroit, Emma pressed her face against the window. watching the only neighborhood she'd ever known recede into the distance. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked gently. Emma turned to him with a determined expression beyond her years. "I'm good at starting over," she said simply. The penthouse left Emma speechless. She moved through the spacious rooms with cautious wonder, touching nothing, as if afraid her presence might somehow contaminate the pristine space. When Alexander showed her the guest room, that would be hers, with its queen-sized bed and private bathroom, she stood frozen in the doorway. "This is all for me," she whispered. "All yours, and tomorrow we can shop for anything you want to make it feel more like your space. Paint colors, decorations, furniture, whatever you like." Emma nodded, still overwhelmed. When Ms. Bennett had completed her initial assessment and left, promising to return for follow-up visits, Emma finally relaxed enough to explore more freely. She examined the kitchen with its gleaming appliances, the living room with its enormous television, the office with its wall of books. "You can read any of them," Alexander told her, noticing her interest in the library. "Any?" Her eyes widened at the permission. "Any at all." That night, after Emma had bathed in a tub with actual bubble bath and changed into new pajamas Olivia had thoughtfully purchased, Alexander tucked her into bed. The girl looked impossibly small in the large bed, her blonde hair splayed against the pillow. "Mr. B," she asked sleepily, "is it okay if I still call you that, even though you're Alexander Belmont again?" "I'd be honored," he said, throat tight with emotion. "You're the only person in the world who calls me that." She smiled, eyes drifting closed. "Good, 'cause that's who found me in the alley. Not Alexander Belmont, Mr. B." Long after she fell asleep, Alexander sat in a chair by her bed watching over her. Tomorrow would bring countless challenges, legal hurdles to establish guardianship, publicity concerns, the continuing investigation into Reynolds's activities. But for tonight, in the quiet of this room, none of that mattered. What mattered was that a little girl who had saved him in every way that counted was finally safe, warm, and beginning to trust that tomorrow might be better than yesterday. The weeks that followed brought adjustments for both Emma and Alexander. For Emma, it meant learning to navigate a world of plenty after years of scarcity. From simple luxuries like hot showers whenever she wanted to, the bewildering experience of shopping for new clothes. For Alexander, it meant reshaping his life around the needs of a 7-year-old, while simultaneously managing a corporate crisis and legal battle. "Mr. Belmont?" Emma's voice came hesitantly from the doorway of his home office one morning. 2 weeks after she'd moved in. She stood there in jeans and a purple sweater, her hair neatly braided. Olivia had arranged for a stylist to visit the penthouse, understanding Emma's reluctance to venture into unfamiliar public spaces. Alexander set aside the legal brief he'd been reviewing. "Yes, Emma. Is it okay if I go to school today?" She twisted the hem of her sweater nervously. "I missed a lot of days, and my teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, will think I dropped out." Alexander checked his calendar quickly. He had meetings scheduled all day, including a crucial one with federal investigators regarding the charges against Victor Reynolds. "Of course you can go to school," he said, already reaching for his phone. "Let me reschedule my morning." "You don't have to take me," Emma said quickly. "I always went by myself before." The thought of Emma walking alone through the city streets made Alexander's chest tighten. "That's not going to happen anymore," he said firmly. "From now on, either I take you or we arrange safe transportation." Emma's brow furrowed. "Because of the bad man, Mr. Reynolds?" Alexander hesitated. He'd been careful not to frighten Emma with details about Reynolds, but she was perceptive enough to piece things together from overheard conversations and news reports. "Partly," he admitted, "but mostly because I care about your safety. That's what adults are supposed to do for children they care about." Emma considered this, then nodded. "Okay, but can we not use the really fancy car? The kids already think I'm weird." Alexander smiled. "No fancy car, promise." An hour later, they pulled up to Emma's school in Alexander's least ostentatious vehicle, a simple black sedan with tinted windows. Emma had been quiet during the drive, staring out the window with increasing tension as they approached the school. "Nervous?" Alexander asked gently. "A little," she admitted. "Everything's different now." "You're still you," he reminded her. "Still the same talented, resourceful Emma who can handle anything." She gave him a small smile, then gathered her new backpack, filled with proper school supplies for the first time in her life. "I'll pick you up at 3, Alexander promised as she climbed out. "Wait for me right here, okay?" Emma nodded, then squared her small shoulders and walked toward the school entrance. Alexander watched until she disappeared inside, fighting the urge to follow and ensure she settled in properly. This was part of letting her maintain some independence, some normalcy. Back at Belmont Tower, Alexander's day quickly filled with crisis management. The investigation into Victor Reynolds had expanded, with the SEC now involved alongside the FBI. Reynolds had been placed on administrative leave by his own board, but was fighting back aggressively, both in court and in the press. "He's given another interview," Olivia reported, dropping a tablet on Alexander's desk. "This time, claiming your disappearance was a publicity stunt designed to sabotage the merger." Alexander scanned the article with growing frustration. "He's desperate. The evidence is overwhelming." "Yes, but he's also dangerous," Olivia reminded him. "The security team reported another attempt to breach our servers last night, and there have been photographers outside your building." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Increase security on Emma's school. Discreetly." "Already done," Olivia assured him. "And the paperwork for temporary guardianship is moving forward. Ms. Bennett has filed her initial report recommending you as a suitable caretaker." "And Jake Sullivan?" "Still serving his sentence. He's been informed of the situation, but has expressed little interest in contesting the arrangement, especially given the financial support you've offered for his rehabilitation." Alexander nodded. Emma's father had readily agreed to temporary guardianship in exchange for Alexander's promise to fund his stay at a top-tier rehabilitation facility once his sentence was complete. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it bought time. Time for Emma to stabilize, for Alexander to prove himself a suitable guardian, for legal arrangements to be formalized. At exactly 3 o'clock, Alexander was waiting outside Emma's school. She emerged with a cautious smile, clutching a folder of papers. "How was it?" he asked as she climbed into the car. "Different," she said. "Mrs. Ramirez was really nice. She gave me special worksheets to help catch up." Emma hesitated. "And some kids asked about you." "Oh?" Alexander kept his tone casual as they pulled away from the curb. "Yeah, Amber said she saw us on the news." Emma frowned. "She wanted to know if you're really a billionaire." Alexander sighed. He'd known this would happen, had prepared for it, in fact, but had hoped Emma might have a few days of normalcy first. "What did you tell her?" Emma shrugged. "I said I didn't know and didn't care, that you're just Mr. B to me." The simple loyalty in her statement touched him deeply. "Thank you, Emma." "Is it true, though? Are you a billionaire?" Alexander considered how to answer. "On paper, yes, Belmont Industries is worth billions, and I own a significant portion of it, but that doesn't change anything between us." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I figured." Then, with the quick subject, changes typical of children, she pulled a paper from her folder. "Look, Mrs. Ramirez says my design might win the contest." Alexander examined the drawing, a flowing gown with intricate detailing that showed remarkable talent. "It's beautiful, Emma, truly professional." Her face lit up with the praise. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Alexander received an urgent call from his head of security. "We've detected unusual surveillance activity around the penthouse," James Reeves reported. "Nothing immediate to be concerned about, but there's definitely someone watching the building." "Reynolds?" "Possibly." "Or the press. We're investigating." Alexander thanked him and hung up, unease settling in his stomach. The confrontation with Reynolds was escalating, becoming more personal, and now Emma was potentially in the crosshairs. The next morning brought a development Alexander had been dreading. As he and Emma ate breakfast, His phone buzzed with an alert from Olivia. He opened the link to find a tabloid headline, "Belmont's secret billionaire CEO hiding street urchin in luxury penthouse." The article was filled with inaccuracies and innuendo, questioning his motives for taking in an impoverished child from Detroit's notorious warehouse district and implying inappropriate relationships with Emma's mother, whom the reporter hadn't even bothered to investigate properly. Worse, there was a grainy photo of Emma entering his building, her face partially visible despite attempts to blur it for legal reasons. Alexander set the phone down, fury burning in his chest. This wasn't just an invasion of privacy, it potentially compromised Emma's safety. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, noticing his expression. "Nothing important," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just some work issues." But Emma wasn't easily fooled. "Is it about me, the reporters?" Alexander hesitated, then decided honesty was the better approach. "Yes, someone wrote a story about you staying with me. It's not very nice or accurate." Emma nodded with surprising calmness. "I figured that would happen. Amber's mom is always reading those magazines about famous people." "I'm sorry, Emma, I'll do everything I can to protect your privacy." She shrugged. "It's okay, I don't care what they say about me." But Alexander cared. He spent the morning with his legal team, drafting cease and desist letters and threatening lawsuits against any publication that violated Emma's privacy as a minor. By afternoon, most outlets had removed her photos, but the story continued to spread. "We need to get ahead of this," Nathaniel advised during an emergency meeting. "The narrative is already spinning out of control. Some are calling it a publicity stunt to distract from the Reynolds scandal." "What do you suggest?" Alexander asked, though he already knew the answer. "A controlled interview. You choose the journalist, set the parameters, present the true story before the false one takes root." Alexander hated the idea of exposing any part of Emma's life to public scrutiny, but the alternative seemed worse. Wild speculation and invasive paparazzi would eventually affect her school life, her sense of security. That evening, he broached the subject carefully with Emma. "Some people are telling stories about us that aren't true," he explained as they sat in the living room after dinner. "About how we met, why you're staying with me." Emma nodded, continuing to sketch in her notebook. "Like when kids at school said my dad was in jail because he killed someone." She looked up. "He didn't. He just gets drunk and fights people sometimes." Alexander's heart ached at her matter-of-fact assessment. "Exactly. And sometimes the best way to stop false stories is to tell the true one." Emma studied him with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. "You want to tell people about how you were in the garbage and I saved you." "Only if you're comfortable with it," Alexander assured her, "and we wouldn't tell everything, just enough to help people understand." Emma considered this, then asked, "Would it help you with your company and stuff?" "It's not about my company, Emma, it's about protecting you." "But would it help?" Alexander sighed. "Yes, it probably would help clear up some misunderstandings, but that's secondary to your well-being." Emma returned to her drawing. "Okay, we can tell them, but I don't want to be on TV." "No TV," Alexander agreed. "Just one print interview with a journalist I trust, and you only answer questions you're comfortable with." The journalist Alexander selected was Catherine Marshall from the Detroit Tribune, a respected reporter known for her integrity. The interview took place in the penthouse, with Ms. Bennett present as Emma's advocate. Catherine asked thoughtful questions, focused more on the bond that had formed between them than on sensationalizing Emma's previous living conditions. "What made you decide to help Mr. Belmont that night?" Catherine asked Emma gently. Emma considered the question seriously. "He needed help, and I know what that's like." She glanced at Alexander. "Plus, he wasn't scary. Some people who drink are scary, but he wasn't." "And Mr. Belmont, how did this experience change you?" Catherine turned to Alexander. Alexander met Emma's eyes as he answered, "It reminded me what truly matters. I've spent my career building technology, creating wealth, expanding influence. But Emma taught me that the most important thing we can build is connection. Trust." She had every reason not to trust anyone, yet she extended kindness to a complete stranger. That kind of courage and compassion is rare in any person, let alone a child who's faced such challenges. The article, published 3 days later, transformed the narrative. Instead of tabloid speculation about inappropriate motives, the public embraced the story of mutual rescue. A lost CEO saved by a resourceful child, who in turn found safety and opportunity with him. Letters and emails poured in, many from people who'd overcome similar hardships, but not everyone was moved by the story. Victor Reynolds saw an opportunity to discredit Alexander by targeting his relationship with Emma. This so-called guardian arrangement reeks of impropriety, Reynolds told a business reporter. Belmont has no experience as a parent, no family connection to this child. One has to question his motives and suitability. The insinuation was clear and despicable. Alexander's legal team immediately filed for defamation, but the damage was done. Child Protective Services was obligated to conduct another review, though Ms. Bennett assured Alexander it was merely procedural. "Your arrangement with Emma is above board and clearly beneficial to her," she explained during an unscheduled home visit. "But we have to respond to formal complaints, even those obviously motivated by personal vendettas." The extra scrutiny meant more interviews for Emma, more documentation of her life before and after coming to live with Alexander. The process was draining for both of them, but especially for Emma, who began having nightmares about being taken away. One night, Alexander woke to the sound of quiet sobbing. He found Emma sitting in her window seat, knees pulled to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside her. "Bad dream?" She nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve. "They took me away. Said you weren't really my family." Alexander pulled her gently into his arms. "That's not going to happen, Emma, I promise." "But what if they make me go back to my dad? Or to strangers?" "I won't let that happen," Alexander said firmly. "We're fighting this together, remember? And we're both pretty good at surviving tough situations." Emma leaned against him, her small body relaxing slightly. "I never had nightmares in the warehouse," she whispered. "Too tired, I guess. Sometimes when we finally feel safe, that's when all the scary feelings catch up to us," Alexander explained, remembering his own post-trauma nightmares. "It doesn't mean you're not brave." They sat together in silence, watching the city lights sparkle below. Finally, Emma spoke again, her voice small but determined. "Mr. B, if they try to take me away, I'll run away and find you again. I'm good at finding people." Alexander's throat tightened with emotion. "I know you are, Emma. You found me when I was lost in every possible way." He pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "But it won't come to that. I promise you." The next morning, Alexander made a decision. It was time to stop playing defense. If Victor Reynolds wanted to attack through Emma, then Alexander would ensure that she had every possible protection, legal, financial, and emotional. He called his lawyer and gave explicit instructions. Then he called Olivia. "Cancel all my meetings for the next 3 days," he told her, "and contact that designer Emma admires, Sophia Chen. Tell her I'd like to commission a special project." "May I ask what you're planning?" Olivia inquired. "Something I should have done from the beginning," Alexander replied. "I'm going to make sure Emma knows she's not just a temporary arrangement in my life. She's family." Emma knew something was happening. Mr. B had been making a lot of phone calls behind closed doors, and Olivia kept giving her these little smiles like they shared a secret. Except Emma wasn't in on it. She didn't mind, though. After a lifetime of adults making decisions without consulting her, she was used to waiting and adapting. What she didn't expect was to find a beautiful woman with a measuring tape waiting in the living room after school one day. "Emma, this is Sophia Chen," Alexander introduced them. "She's a fashion designer, one of the best in the country." Emma's eyes widened. "The Sophia Chen? From the magazines?" The elegant woman smiled warmly. "The very same. And you must be the talented Emma I've heard so much about." Emma looked between her and Alexander in confusion. "You told her about me?" I showed her your designs, Alexander explained. She was very impressed. Sophia nodded in agreement. You have a natural eye for structure and flow, quite extraordinary for someone your age. Emma blushed deeply. Thank you, Mom. Please call me Sophia. Now I understand you have a design in a school competition. Yes, but it's just a drawing. Well, how would you like to see it become real? Emma's mouth dropped open. You mean make my actual dress? That's exactly what I mean. Mr. Belmont has commissioned me to create your design, with you as my co-designer, of course. We'll need to take measurements and discuss fabric choices. Emma was speechless, looking to Alexander with questioning eyes. The competition exhibit is in 3 weeks, he explained. I thought it would be special if your design wasn't just on paper. But, Emma hesitated, won't that be cheating? If a real designer helps me? Sophia laughed lightly. Not at all, I'm merely executing your vision like a seamstress would. The design is entirely yours, and I'll teach you some techniques along the way, if you'd like. For the next 2 hours, Emma experienced the kind of magical afternoon she'd never dared imagine. Sophia measured her carefully. Every designer should model their own creation at least once, she insisted, then spread fabric samples across the dining table. Silks, chiffons, satins in various shades of blue and purple. The colors Emma had specified in her design. This one, Emma said confidently, selecting a shimmering periwinkle silk. With this for the overlay. She pointed to a translucent lavender chiffon. Sophia raised an eyebrow, impressed. Excellent choice. The movement between these two will be exactly right for the cascading effect in your sketch. As they worked, Sophia asked Emma about her inspiration, her favorite designers, her process. Emma answered eagerly, thrilled to speak with someone who took her passion seriously. Alexander watched from the doorway, heart full. Emma was animated in a way he rarely saw, gesturing enthusiastically, eyes bright with excitement. This was the carefree child she should have been all along. Mr. B, Emma called, noticing him. Sophia says I can come to her studio next week to see how they cut the pattern. That sounds wonderful, he said, entering the room. Maybe we can make it a special day. Studio visit, then lunch somewhere nice? Emma nodded eagerly, then turned back to the fabrics, completely absorbed. Later that evening, after Sophia had left with promises to stay in touch about the dress, Emma sat at the dining table working on homework. Alexander joined her with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Did you have fun today? He asked. It was the best day ever, Emma replied, eyes still dreamy. Sophia Chen knows my name. She liked my designs. Alexander smiled. She did more than like. Them. She said you have real potential, Emma, the kind that could lead to a career someday if you want it. Emma traced patterns on the table with her finger. Do you think that's possible? Someone like me becoming a designer? Someone like you? Alexander raised an eyebrow. You mean someone talented, creative, and determined? Absolutely. Emma shook her head. No, I mean from where I came from, the warehouse with no money and stuff. Alexander set down his mug. Emma, look at me. He waited until her eyes met his. Where you came from shapes you, but it doesn't limit you. Some of the most successful people I know started with nothing. Really? Really. In fact, he hesitated, then continued. I've been thinking about something important. Something I wanted to talk to you about. Emma's expression grew wary. Are they making me leave? No, Alexander quickly reassured her. Just the opposite, actually. He took a deep breath. Emma, how would you feel about making our arrangement permanent? About me adopting you legally? Emma froze, her mug halfway to her lips. Adopt? Like forever? Yes, you would legally be my daughter. This would be your home, not temporarily, but permanently. What about my dad? Emma asked, her voice small. Alexander had prepared. For this question, I've spoken with your father, Emma. He's agreed that this would be best for you. He knows he can't provide the stability you need right now, and possibly for a long time. Did you pay him? The directness of the question startled Alexander. I've arranged to cover the costs of his rehabilitation program, he answered honestly. But that's not a payment for you, Emma. You're not something to be bought or sold. It's to help him get better for his own sake. Emma considered this, then asked, "Would I have to call you Dad?" Alexander shook his head. "You can call me whatever makes you comfortable. Mr. B, Alexander, or anything else. And what about my last name?" "That would be your choice too. You could keep Sullivan, take Belmont, or hyphenate both." Emma was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this information. Finally, she asked, "Why do you want to adopt me?" It was the most important question, and Alexander answered from his heart. "Because you changed my life, Emma. Because you showed me kindness when you had every reason not to. Because you're bright and talented and deserve every opportunity. And because," his voice wavered slightly, "I can't imagine my life without you in it now." Emma studied his face intently, searching for any sign of insincerity. Finding none, she whispered, "I'd like that. Being adopted." Alexander felt a weight lift from his chest. "I'm very glad to hear that. Can I think about the name thing, though?" "Of course. There's no rush." Emma nodded, then surprised him by getting up and wrapping her arms around his neck in a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. Alexander held her close, his throat tight with emotion. "No, Emma. Thank you." The following week brought significant developments on multiple fronts. The FBI investigation into Victor Reynolds resulted in formal charges: securities fraud, corporate espionage, and most seriously, conspiracy to commit assault related to Alexander's accident. Reynolds was released on bail, but removed from his position at Reynolds Technologies. Meanwhile, Alexander's legal team filed official adoption paperwork. The process would take months to finalize, but the initial hearing for temporary legal guardianship went smoothly, with the judge expressing approval of the stable environment Alexander had created for Emma. Ms. Bennett's final report was glowing. "Mr. Belmont has demonstrated exceptional commitment to Emma's well-being, providing not only material security, but emotional support and appropriate developmental opportunities. The bond between them is genuine and mutually beneficial." As these legal processes moved forward, Emma flourished. Her grades improved dramatically with consistent attendance and tutoring. Her design for the school competition, now a reality thanks to Sophia Chen's mentorship, was displayed prominently at the Community Arts Center exhibition. The evening of the exhibition opening, Alexander escorted Emma through the gallery. She wore her design, a flowing periwinkle gown with layers of lavender chiffon that seemed to float around her as she walked. Her hair was styled simply, with a small crystal clip Olivia had given her as a gift. She looked transformed, still Emma, but with a new confidence. "There's my design," she exclaimed, pointing to a display where her original sketch hung beside a professional photograph of the finished dress. Below it, a small placard read, "Dreams in Motion" by Emma Sullivan, age 7. Mentored by Sophia Chen. Alexander crouched beside her. "It's beautiful, Emma. Everyone's looking at it." Indeed, a small crowd had gathered around her display, admiring both the sketch and the photograph. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, approached with the school principal. "Emma, this is extraordinary," Mrs. Ramirez said warmly. "We're so proud of you." The principal nodded in agreement. Truly exceptional work. And to have Sophia Chen as a mentor, what an opportunity, Emma beamed. "Mr. B arranged it. He showed her my designs." Alexander shook hands with the educators. "Emma's talent did all the work. I just made a phone call." As they moved through the exhibition, Emma received numerous compliments from other parents and teachers. She handled the attention with surprising grace, thanking people politely while maintaining her natural modesty. Midway through the evening, the competition judges announced the winners. When Emma's name was called for first place in her age category, she froze in shock. "Go on," Alexander encouraged gently. "You earned this." Emma walked to the small stage, her dress floating around her, and accepted the certificate and small trophy with wide eyes. The applause was enthusiastic, especially from a group in the back that Emma hadn't noticed before: Olivia, Nathaniel, and several other Belmont employees who had come to support her. "I think you have a fan club," Alexander whispered when she returned. Emma blushed but smiled with genuine pleasure. Later, as they drove home, she sat quietly in the back seat, trophy clutched in her hands. "Everything okay?" Alexander asked, noting her silence. "I was just thinking," she said slowly, "about how different everything is now." She looked out the window at the city lights. 6 months ago, I was collecting bottles in the rain, and now? Now you're a prize-winning designer, Alexander finished for her. Emma nodded. "It doesn't feel real sometimes." "But it is real, Emma. You earned that trophy with your talent and hard work." She was quiet for another moment, then said, "I decided about my name." Alexander glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Oh?" "I want to be Emma Sullivan Belmont," she stated firmly. "Sullivan because that's who I was before, and Belmont because—" She hesitated. "Because that's who I'm becoming. Is that okay?" Alexander blinked against the sudden moisture in his eyes. "That's more than okay, Emma. That's perfect." The next morning, Alexander had a surprise for Emma. After breakfast, he led her to a room in the penthouse that had previously been used for storage. "Close your eyes," he instructed. Emma obeyed, allowing him to guide her through the doorway. "Okay, you can look now." She opened her eyes and gasped. The room had been transformed into a design studio with a proper drafting table, professional art supplies, a sewing machine, dress form, and walls of fabric samples. Bright natural light streamed through windows that overlooked the city. "Is this for me?" she whispered in disbelief. "All for you," Alexander confirmed. "Sophia helped design it. She says every serious designer needs a proper workspace." Emma walked slowly around the room, touching each item with reverence. "This is too much, Mr. B." "Not at all," he disagreed gently. "This is an investment in your future, Emma. Your talent deserves the right tools." She turned to him with eyes full of emotion. "Thank you for everything." "There's one more thing," Alexander said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box and handed it to her. Emma opened it carefully to find a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a shopping cart. "To remember where we started," Alexander explained, "and how far we've come." Emma looked up, tears shining in her eyes. Without a word, she threw her arms around him in a fierce hug. Alexander held her close, his own eyes damp. They stood like that for a long moment, a man who had lost himself and been found, and a child who had found strength in the harshest circumstances. Two unlikely souls connected by chance, compassion, and now by choice. "Emma Sullivan Belmont," Alexander said softly. "Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" She nodded against his chest. "The best." Outside the window, Detroit spread before them, a city of contrasts, of struggle and revival, of endings and beginnings. Like them, it was in the process of redefining itself, finding new purpose without forgetting its past. And in a small studio high above its streets, a new family was taking shape, bound not by blood, but by something equally powerful: the choice to see value in each other when the world had looked away. 5 years later, the grand opening of Second Chance Designs attracted more attention than a typical boutique launch in downtown Detroit. Journalists, business leaders, and fashion industry insiders gathered outside the beautifully renovated historic building, awaiting the ribbon-cutting ceremony. A discreet security detail managed the crowd while caterers prepared champagne and hors d'oeuvres inside. In a private room above the boutique, 12-year-old Emma Sullivan Belmont adjusted her emerald green dress, her own design, of course, and checked her reflection nervously. "What if nobody likes the collection?" she asked, turning to where Alexander sat watching her with pride. "They'll love it," he assured her, "but even if some critics don't, that's part of being an artist. Not everyone understood Coco Chanel or Christian Dior at first either." Emma smiled at the comparison. Over the past 5 years, her talent had blossomed under Sophia Chen's mentorship and Alexander's unwavering support. What had begun as simple sketches on scrap paper had evolved into a cohesive children's formal wear collection. Designed by Emma with technical assistance from professional seamstresses. Besides, Alexander continued, this is about more than just fashion. Remember the mission. Emma nodded, her expression growing serious. Second chances for everyone. The boutique was only part of the enterprise. Behind the stylish showroom and design studio lay the true heart of the project, a training program for homeless and at-risk youth, teaching them marketable skills in retail, tailoring, business management, and design. Every purchase would help fund scholarships and apprenticeships for young people who needed a fresh start, just as Emma once had. Ready? Alexander asked, checking his watch. Emma took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Ready. Together they descended the stairs to join Olivia and Nathaniel, who were handling last-minute details. Sophia Chen was already speaking with fashion reporters, generating buzz about her protégé's debut collection. There she is, Sophia exclaimed as Emma appeared. The young visionary herself! Cameras flashed as Emma shyly joined her mentor. At 12, she was still reserved with strangers, but years of coaching from Alexander had given her the confidence to handle public appearances with grace. Emma, how does it feel to be possibly the youngest boutique owner in America? A reporter called out. Emma glanced at Alexander before answering. It feels like a responsibility, she said carefully, not just to make beautiful clothes, but to make sure other kids get the same chances I got. Her sincerity came through, clearly, and the reporters nodded appreciatively. This wasn't just a publicity stunt or a rich man's indulgence of his adopted daughter. There was substance behind the style. Mr. Belmont, another journalist asked, what inspired this project? Alexander placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. 5 years ago, I lost everything that I thought mattered. Position, wealth, identity. I was literally found in the garbage. He smiled as scattered laughter acknowledged the now famous story. Emma taught me that true value isn't in what you own, but in what you give. This boutique represents that philosophy. The ribbon-cutting ceremony proceeded smoothly, with Emma and Alexander jointly wielding the oversized scissors. As guests flooded into the boutique, exclaiming over the elegant decor and innovative designs, Emma slipped her hand into Alexander's. It's really happening, she whispered. It really is, he agreed. The boutique reflected both their personalities. Alexander's appreciation for classic architecture blended with Emma's fresh, youthful aesthetic. The original brick walls remained exposed, while modern lighting highlighted display areas. The children's formal wear collection occupied the main floor, with a small exhibition space showcasing Emma's design evolution from age 7 to 12. In a corner near the fitting rooms, a special display caught the attention of many visitors. Protected under glass was an old battered shopping cart, the very one Emma had used to collect recyclables, and most importantly, to rescue Alexander from that rainy alley. Beside it, a simple plaque read, "Where second chances begin." As the evening progressed, a particular group of visitors arrived that made Emma beam with pride. 20 teenagers and young adults, the first cohort of second-chance apprentices, entered the boutique looking both nervous and excited. Most came from backgrounds similar to Emma's original circumstances: foster care, unstable homes, poverty. "I'd like to introduce our apprentices," Emma announced to the gathering. With remarkable poise, she called each by name, mentioning their specific roles in the program, from design assistants to retail trainees to business operations. "These amazing young people will be the real force behind Second Chance," she explained. "I might have designed the first collection, but they'll help create everything that comes next." The speech earned enthusiastic applause, particularly from a group in the back. Emma's former teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, the librarian, Miss Patterson, who had encouraged her early interest in fashion, and Ms. Bennett from Child Protective Services, who had helped facilitate Emma's adoption. Alexander watched with a full heart as Emma circulated through the crowd, introducing her apprentices to industry contacts who could further their careers. She had grown into a remarkable young person, still occasionally haunted by her early hardships, but increasingly defined by her compassion and creativity rather than her past trauma. "You've done an extraordinary thing here," Sophia Chen commented, joining Alexander by the windows. both with Emma and with this program. Emma did the extraordinary part, Alexander replied. I just provided resources. Sophia smiled knowingly. You provided much more than that. You gave her what every child needs: stability, belief in her abilities, and love. She gestured toward Emma, who was earnestly explaining her design process to a fashion magazine editor. That confidence doesn't come from material advantage alone. Alexander couldn't argue with that assessment. The journey had been challenging. Years of therapy helping Emma process her early neglect. Legal battles to finalize the adoption, learning to navigate their unconventional family dynamic. There had been nightmares, misunderstandings, moments of rebellion. But through it all they had maintained the bond formed in that warehouse room, a connection built on mutual respect and genuine care. As the evening wound down and the last guest departed, Emma kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto a velvet sofa in the boutique's private lounge. That was exhausting, she declared, but amazing. Alexander laughed, loosening his tie and joining her. You were magnificent. Those apprentices clearly adore you. I just want them to succeed, Emma said simply. They deserve the chance. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the Detroit skyline through the boutique's large windows. The city had changed in the past 5 years, new development alongside thoughtful preservation, much like their own journey together. I have something for you, Alexander said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small box and handed it to Emma. To commemorate today. Emma opened it to find a charm bracelet with a single gold charm, a miniature shopping cart that matched her silver pendant. It's perfect, she said, immediately fastening it around her wrist. I'll add a charm for every collection we create. I was thinking, Alexander said casually, that maybe next season could include some adult pieces too. We've had several inquiries already. Emma's eyes lit up. Really, you think I'm ready? I know you are, and I have connections at Fashion Week who've expressed interest in featuring a few pieces. Fashion Week? Emma squeaked, her professional composure briefly giving way to pre-teen excitement. Alexander nodded, enjoying her reaction. Just a small presentation, but yes, if you're interested. If I'm interested? Are you kidding? She threw her arms around him in a fierce hug. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Don't thank me yet, he cautioned, laughing. It means a lot of hard work ahead. I'm not afraid of hard work, Emma reminded him. No, Alexander agreed softly. You never have been. Later that night, after returning to the penthouse they still called home, Emma stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the city where her extraordinary journey had begun. She touched the shopping cart pendant at her neck, then the matching charm on her new bracelet. So much had changed in 5 years. She was Emma Sullivan Belmont now, adopted daughter of one of Detroit's most prominent citizens, student at an exclusive private school, debut designer with her own boutique. Yet part of her would always be that small girl pushing a shopping cart through rain-soaked alleys, fighting for survival, with nothing but determination and ingenuity. And that was exactly as it should be. In the living room, Alexander sat reviewing final sales figures from the boutique opening. The numbers were impressive, but they weren't what mattered most. What mattered was the transformation he'd witnessed, not just in Emma, but in himself. The driven CEO obsessed with corporate domination had evolved into something more complex, a business leader who understood that success could be measured in human terms as well as financial ones. Belmont Industries had changed too under his redirected leadership. The company had become a pioneer in ethical technology development, refusing military contracts and focusing instead on innovations in education, healthcare, and environmental sustainability. The board had initially resisted this vision, but the financial results and positive public response had eventually won them over. Victor Reynolds' downfall had been swift and complete. Convicted on multiple charges, he was currently serving a substantial prison sentence. Reynolds Technologies had been acquired by a consortium that restructured it entirely. Alexander closed his laptop and walked to Emma's door, knocking softly. Come. In, she called. He found her sitting on her window seat, still in her emerald dress, looking thoughtful. Everything okay? He asked. She nodded, just thinking about how it all started, that night in the rain. Alexander joined her on the window seat. Do you ever regret it? Helping me? Emma looked at him in surprise. Never. It was the best decision I ever made. Mine, too, he said quietly. Accepting your help, staying with you when I didn't know who I was. Best decisions of my life. Emma leaned against his shoulder comfortably. Do you think it was just luck? That I found you that night? Alexander considered the question carefully. I think sometimes the universe puts the right people in our path exactly when we need them most. Was it luck? Maybe. Or maybe it was something more purposeful. Like fate? Like two people who needed exactly what the other could give. Torninma smiled at that. I like that idea. They sat together in companionable silence, watching the city lights below. Eventually, Emma spoke again. You know what I think about sometimes? That if you hadn't lost your memory, if you'd just been conscious, that night you probably would have given me money and called a taxi. We would never have known each other, not really. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. You're probably right. It took losing everything, identity, status, memory, for me to see what actually matters. Which? 'Tis a little connection, compassion, courage. He smiled at her. All the things you taught me in that warehouse. Emma rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her pleased expression. You're getting sappy in your old age, Mr. B. Probably, he agreed with a laugh, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The day-to-day operations of the boutique, Emma's schoolwork, Alexander's ongoing corporate responsibilities. But for tonight, they simply enjoyed the milestone they'd reached together. A father and daughter bound by choice rather than blood. A family created from the unlikeliest of beginnings. Outside their window, Detroit continued its own renaissance, rebuilding and reimagining itself block by block. And in a penthouse